Hello, welcome to our weekly discourse here with our favorite Vaishnava historian, Shripad Anandinath Das Babaji Maharaj, your servant Chintamani Devi Dasi here, and we're exploring the history of plagues and its connection to Vaishnavism.
Greetings, friends, and thanks for joining with us today. I hope you've had a chance to engage in some of our other discussions here we've had. We've got a very special presentation today. Before we get started, I wanted to offer my humble obeisance to all of you in the seva of Gurudev and Lord Hari, which is the meaning of our life. I am a practicing Vaishnav yogi for a little over 40 years now, and primarily a follower of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who you see pictured here dancing with his devotees. I think is at the Rath Yatra in this depiction. And as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followers, his primary practice that he gave was the counting of holy names on beads, or he used to use his fingers, but the practice of counting the holy name of God, and his recommendation that his devotees, this was their prime meditation, was to chant at least one lakh of names a day, which is 100,000 names, which breaks down into about 92 rounds a day. So over the time, you know, it's inerviated a little from the energy of the turning world. And His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami came back in the late 1960s. He was an Avesh avatar of Lord Chaitanya. In other words, he was wearing the Vesha or dress of Lord Chaitanya. It wasn't like a regular saint coming to help us with Mahaprabhu, as I explained in our last video, but it actually came in the dress of Mahaprabhu himself. And he, for the Americans who tend to be a little more influenced by samskaras, perhaps even negative karma, and indeed the force of Maya, he reduced that amount to 16 rounds a day. And he said, you at least must chant as much. Otherwise, how can you get out of Maya? How can you get your head above water without at least this practice? I'm following in that line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and my guru lineage also goes back to his godbrother, who he said he was his Siksha guru, which was Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Prabhupada told us, I consider him my Siksha guru. What to speak of the benefit you could have? So I took that, to heart, and I went to saw Srila Sridhar Maharaj and got my initiation there, my Diksha initiation, and then went on further. After Guru Maharaj left his body, I went to Jagannath Puri. You can see me here in this picture doing parikrama around the Jagannath temple, and some people accompanying me took a nice picture. I was so happy. I had a big smile on my face because I was feeling such happiness in Jagannath Puri. And I was just initiated that day, a few days before, into the lineage of the Babaji. And that was one of my practices of austerity, or what's called tapasya, was that I was required to do 108 circumambulations of the Jagannath temple by Dadadiya Baba. So I did that. And then, of course, here we're still going. I hosted a TV show. I'm just giving a little history myself. Don't mind. It's not any ahankar on my part, which means false ego, but just in my professional business, which I've been doing for a long time as a public researcher and specialist in researching on certain topics, it's always important to give a little bit of qualification for yourself, what you do, so that when I speak about the topics I'm going to talk about today, it will make sense to you and you'll think back about my qualifications and have some, ideally and hopefully, some mode of respect for that I'm a serious researcher, not just somebody with an opinion or an idea. So enough of that there. I just want to let you know, but we practice Krishna consciousness, or what is called Hari Bhajan, and we live this life very seriously, practicing the daily chanting of the holy names on the japa beads. Now, again, I've been doing this for a long time. I used to host a TV show back in the 1980s, which is the only TV show that any ISKCON or other devotee has ever produced that's been on national news and things like that. I've been on all the major networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, back before the internet, where I did some really important research on the what's called exopolitics, or what you might know as the extraterrestrial phenomena working with world governments. Now, some people may wince or make a face about that. That's from the excessive brainwashing that has been going on for 70 years to try to make people think it's not real. However, just 3 weeks ago, the Navy, the U.S. Department of the Navy, made an official announcement that yes, they're real. We've known about them. They didn't state how long. I know it's been at least 70 years. And this week, just last week, today's Saturday. So this was this Tuesday, there was a report that came out where the Navy made an announcement. We have an official department now that is tracking and watching the extraterrestrials. So keep that in mind, because in our Vedic teaching, under the guidance of Mahaprabhu, who was the supreme Vedic teacher, he told us that of the 4,800,000 species, at least 100,000 of those approximately are human forms, or in this case, humanoid forms. And part of a large group of the extraterrestrials that have been visiting the Earth for a long, long time, monitoring the Earth, building bases inside, under the Earth, and outside of the Earth, and creating little planets that they do surveillance on and stuff, are of the humanoid form. So it's a very important part of our research. But if the main thing to understand about Vaishnavism or any spiritual practice, and I want you to think deeply about this, is going to help you for the rest of your life. What we are doing when we get up every day, the way we're thinking, the way our mind is working, the way we do our japa practice, the way we approach Lord Hari with tears in our eyes and love in our heart, just like a regular relationship. I often say the beginning, middle, and end of this practice of Krishna consciousness is falling in love with God. But what we are doing is applying for a visa. It's exactly the same as if we're applying for a visa to the spiritual world, to Vaikuntha, or to some of the other planets, such as the Vrindavan planets, Golok, Vrindavan, places like this. We're actually applying to God and his departments of great, great saints, and literally like siddhas who are around him and circumambulating him, devotees, siddhas. And we're applying to that group for a visa to the spiritual world. It's exactly like, for example, if you're an Indian and you have some brilliant technological abilities and you want to come to America, well, they're not issuing visas right now. Maybe they will in the future. We certainly know they have in the past. But the point is, you apply for your visa, they check everything out, they interview you at the second stage. Maybe you get called for an interview, or you get an email, say, answer the following questions. You have to tell them truthfully, because their department will investigate that and see if you're telling the truth. Then all this goes on, sometimes lasting years and years. And finally, you get a letter saying, I'm sorry, you're rejected. We don't accept your visa. You cannot come to America. Or, congratulations, you've been accepted. Your visa number is such and such. Your application and subsequent follow-up questions have been approved. You may now apply for your visa there at your embassy, and you may come to America. And it's a big, big thing if you're trying to come here and get a job. You can imagine, think about it, it's life-changing. Well, what we're doing as practicing Vaishnava Bhakti Hari devotees is at least 108 times more important and bigger than that, and more exciting when you get approved for the visa. So every action that we do, every word we speak, every thought we have when we get up in the morning, yeah, maybe you're having a rough morning, you got an ache or something in your shoulder, whatever. It's okay maybe to spurt out a little curse or something, but when you get up, no matter how you feel, you should sit up in bed and go, Jai Gora Hari, Gora Hari, Gora Hari, Gora Hari, or Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda, Radhe Govinda. It's actually the same. Gora Hari, Radhe Govinda. These are all the same because we understand Mahaprabhu's position as the divine manifestation of Lord Radha Krishna. So at least say that, then go, oh, my shoulder really hurts, and then do what you have to do. Or if your stomach, whatever it is, I'm just giving you some ideas. The main thing is, though, is that we are applying for a visa to go to the spiritual world. I described to you how difficult all this it is to get a visa to come to America, and how overjoyed someone feels when they get that visa application approved. Can you imagine our joy at the time of death? Or if you really work this practice hard and you really take it serious, much, much prior to death, and you get your visa approved, and you're able to enter in what I describe as what's called the graveyard of Sat Chit Ananda Sundaram. It's a very beautiful graveyard. It's not something to be afraid of, but it is a transitory point where basically you've had several levels of application and your visa's getting approved, and you still, with folded hands and tears in your eyes, you're begging the Lord, please approve my visa. I want to come to you, and I want to be in your world. I want to be in your land. So this gives you an idea. Now, on a more understandable way, really what this is about, this human form, it's about your physical, cerebral, subatomic, neurological structure. It's how you wake up. It's how you think every day. What are your goals? What do you want to do in life? Do you need a partner? Do you need a boyfriend or a girlfriend? How are you going to find them? Again, it's all in your physical. Cerebral means mental state. Subatomic neurological structure means within the nerves. You can't see them. You know you have nerves because if you touch your skin right now, you'll feel it. Well, how did that happen? You took your finger, you touched the skin, you felt it. You felt maybe the hair over the skin. You felt all that. How did that whole complex design occur? That's called the subatomic neurological structure of the body. So it's about reorganizing the vital underlying energies that pervade the psychophysical structure that's within you, reorganizing them by applying for this visa through the daily chanting of 16 or ideally 32 rounds a day, which is what Prabhupada originally told the devotees they should chant 30. At least he told Mukunda Maharaj that, who was a good friend of mine. You may have heard of him, Mukunda Maharaj. And I don't think he minds me telling this. He used to tell me he was very happy about it. Is that Prabhupada told him, for you at least 32 rounds a day, because I knew him way back when. We lived together for a period about 6 years or so in the 80s. And he would see me chanting 32 rounds a day, which I've done since around 1976 for over 40 years, every day. And I never talked about it. This is the first time. Now I'm getting old, so I think I better tell devotees about this because it'll help them, I think. Because Mukunda Maharaj said, I couldn't do that practice, but I see you're doing it. And he was very kind in that way. And I'll never forget that. And we used to go on long japa walks and talk about these things. But I realized in the midst of doing that the soul is a verb and it's experienced in motion deep within the nerves of the Atma, or the Jiva particle. That is what, quote, we are. The true we, or us, is a Jiva particle, what's called in Sanskrit a Jiva, or not Sanskrit, but it's Vedic knowledge, a Jiva. It's like an infinite particle. It's like a golden drop of God, a particle. And it's a verb, just like some people get confused when I say that. Well, I thought it was a thing. Well, keep working on it. You'll figure it out. But if you subatomically break down any subatomic principle of an atom, say an atom of a computer screen, maybe you're sitting at a desktop, there's your computer screen, or say your keyboard. If you're able to chip off a little piece of that keyboard with a little nail file or something and put it under a microscope, first of all, you'll see millions of cells. Then you go in one of the cells and you go into the subatomic portion, the subatomic aspect of that, and all you'll see is space and atoms swirling around the nucleus, or the center of that. And Wayne Dyer did an extensive study in this. He actually went into these $1 million laboratories where they had these kind of subatomic microscopes, and he looked at the atoms. And he said, when I thought about him, when I looked at him, I said, move this way. The particles, the atom would move that way, just on his thought. He says, now come back to the center, and they would move back. He was blown away. He talked about it before he passed away in one of his PBS specials. Someone I really admired a lot, Wayne Dyer. So deep within us, this subatomic Jiva particle is actually a verb. It's in motion, and it's activated by the things I just described. In other words, your physical body, cerebral, mental state, subatomic neurological structure. It's really about reorganizing all of those things, those vital underlying energies that pervade the entire psychophysical structure to overcome three things that constantly harass every person, and including devotees who aren't that advanced, and that is money, food, and sex. Money, food, and sex are always, food means health. Money, food, dash, health, sex. On and on and on. Should I do this? Should I eat that? Should I do this? Should I become a vegan? Should I do that? I'm not supposed to have sex because I'm a Vaishnava. Should I have some sex or none? And they make up stuff rather than following the scriptures because of, for whatever reason. But it's really not about all that, because it's a dilemma that doesn't exist when you become enlivened and enlightened in Krishna consciousness. There's no sex dilemma. It's a false sex dilemma. There's no food dilemma. It's a food cult. It's a hoax. The food cultism around food is a hoax. It's just another hoax of the mundane world. And money, you need money. I'll show you how to earn money. And that's done through, same thing, reprogramming your vital energies, your psychophysical structure. Anyway, we're going to get on with the talk here in a minute. I want to give you this basic thing, but changing the feelings and connections you have with life to produce the results you want to achieve, that is the goal. And that's how you can turn money into a non-event. It's always work, and there's any job or business you have, there's always a grind associated with that. You can never overcome that. People want to cower away, oh, it'll be a grind for the system. Everything's a grind. Being a hippie living under a tree is a grind, because the bugs bite you and people come up and kick you and try to steal what little you have. Being a vagabond, you run out of gas, you got no money. What do? You see, working hard like I do every day in the futures markets and trading and studying and researching for the presentation I promise to make in a second here. Every day I grind. Everything has a grind to it, but that's why you reprogram the feelings and the association you have. And one of the slogans I keep little slogans behind my desk, and one of is our attitude towards life will be life's attitude towards us. Never forget that, and never forget to crush the fear. Otherwise, the fear is going to crush you, and you don't want that. We belong to God. That's the first step when you become devotee and you get initiated. I belong to Guru and Hari. And it's a deep thing. This is not a common thing. People that try to imitate devotees, they don't realize it's a waste of time, because we don't exist anymore. We give up that existence for Guru and Hari. We do not exist for ourselves anymore. Now, one can say, well, I'm new and I'm trying. Well, forget trying. You took initiation. You don't exist anymore for yourself. You only exist for Lord Hari and your Guru Dev. And so in that sense, I'm coming out a little bit here with the presentation today that will absolutely blow your mind. So what I'm going to start out with is I'm going to use my screen share here of Radha Charan Das Dev. Now this is really important, and I want to show you why. Because Radha Charan Das Dev was a great saint before the Gaudiya Math. Now, he was good friends with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and you can learn more about him on my previous video called The Secret History of Mahaprabhu Coming to America. And Radha Charan Das Dev, although he didn't come, speaking of applying for visas, he got up to that point where he was trying to apply to get a visa to come. He was so anxious because he had such deep thoughts for Lord Chaitanya and incredible cities that he would use in the service of Mahaprabhu. And we often hear about Vaishnavas acquiring cities, and cities can be used for the service of the Lord. They're not normally exhibited by Vaishnavas who have them, but they can be used for the purpose of serving the Lord. One thing that Radha Charan Das Dev did, I'll leave his divine, it's a retouched painting from an original photo in his younger age. But Radha Charan Das Dev used to chant, and he would screech and chant the names of Nityananda, and they would dance, and he'd be spinning and swirling, and then he would stop and he would do a Shaktipat gaze at the people in his group, and they would go into a trance, and most of them, because of the intensity of the feeling, would faint on the ground. They would wake up and say, oh my God, I went to the spiritual world and I saw you there and I saw everyone that's here dancing and chanting. They just become completely overwhelmed, like a blind person all of a sudden getting sight again. None of us can understand what that could possibly be like, to be blind and then all of a sudden be able to see again. You can see what the color blue is. You can't describe it. You can't name what it looks like. Give it a try. Go ahead, give it a try. What is the color blue? What is it? It's without describing it in relation to another object, you see what I mean? But the point is, people would come out of the trance and they'd be forever surrendered to Radha Charan Das Dev. Now, what happened, his devotees were put through many challenges because Calcutta, which was part of the bubonic plague that had occurred, and I'm going to go over some more of this in a little while, occurred in Europe, had spread to India, and it was vicious beyond belief. All the people in Calcutta, bodies were piled up on the streets. Calcutta's if you've ever been to India, it's a tough nut to crack anyway, going there and trying to get around and do stuff. You'll see dead dogs lying on the street, another dog eaten out of its intestines because it's hungry. I mean, really heavy stuff. Plague had come to Calcutta, and all up and down the streets, the dead bodies were piling up and people stumbling out of their homes with rot and diseases on their body from this horrifying plague. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just giving you an extremely descriptive picture of what this was like. And the word got back to Jagannath Puri, where Radha Charan Das Dev was staying. And he had many things he had done in Puri, and it's more of history, but one that you'll appreciate if you've ever been to Puri, the temple overlooking the ocean where Haridas Thakur's samadhi is, he rediscovered that. He's the one who discovered the location of the body that Mahaprabhu had buried in the sand and kicked sand over. He had rediscovered that location and built that temple there. That's one of his many wonderful things he's done as a Vaishnava historian and maintainer of the Sampradaya. But Radha Charan Das Dev heard about this plague in Calcutta, and the word was that when he heard about this, he was going between like vicious anger like Nrsingadev and crying like a baby, falling on the ground and collapsing, and just so upset that how people are suffering there. Oh Lord Hari, what can be done? And at that point, his disciples readied themselves and he said, we must go to Calcutta. Now remember, and I want you to think about what devotees are doing right now in this fake pandemic we're in the midst of now, and I'll go over some of that in a little bit. They're cowering to the nonsense about social distancing and all this wearing masks and all this, but Radha Charan Das Dev, no place to stay in Calcutta. They're in Puri. There's no cars or anything to go by. They just started walking, and the faithful followers, and there were dozens of them, chanting, following him and chanting the names of the Lord, knowing their fate was to see a completely insane place of complete sadness and craziness of bodies, like I said, piled up and people sick, no place to stay for him or devotees, no prasadam arrangements, no guest houses to stay in, no plan, nothing. Just 1,008% absolute reliance only, underlined 108 times, on the holy name of the Lord Hari. So they madly began chanting. They got to Calcutta and he kicked it up into another notch and started wailing and screaming like he does, chanting the names of Hari. And the followers were chanting, and they went up and down the alleys of Calcutta and down the main streets and the boulevards. After about a week or so, the plague started diminishing, and they kept going. He kicked it up another notch, and they kept chanting and wailing. And I don't know, somehow they managed bath and food, snan and food, and some place to stay. I don't know. That history is not there. But keep in mind that Srila Prabhupada, in his lectures, I've heard, because I've listened to most of his lectures, I've heard at least 3 occasions where he's mentioned that the chanting, how he's talking about how his divine grace lovingly used to do with all of the devotees, would say, the holy name is so powerful. And he'd talk about the great plague of Calcutta and how devotees went there and stopped the plague. Srila Prabhupada's words. And he also mentioned that the newspapers wrote reports on it because it was so astounding when Radha Charan Das Dev went there and stopped the plague in Calcutta. Absolutely mind-blowing. Stop the plague through the chanting of the holy names. And again, as confirmed by Srila Prabhupada. So something wonderful and important to remember. So the next slide I'd like to show you here. I don't have a fancy slideshow or anything, but on Zoom I can just bring up the pictures and go over them with you, and it works out well. And again, if you're so kind, you can watch my previous video, how Mahaprabhu was secretly basically coming to America through his saints, such as Radha Charandas Dev, who influenced two people prior. The first two saints that came to America were heavily influenced by Radha Charandas Dev. Again, watch my previous presentation on that. This is a thing showing the plagues here. This is the Antony plague, 165 AD, long ago. The estimated amount of people that died, 5 million people. And you can see, again, bodies piled up, people fainting, astonishment and morale. This all will lead to something that will absolutely blow your mind today. But I'm just trying to bring some clarity to what a real plague is. Because I openly said, and I said it from day one, because I've researched this stuff and I know the people who put it out and I know what they're all about, which is satanic worship. So I knew without a doubt from day one, and I publicly said it's all a hoax. And I'll have some more of that in a minute, but I want you to get a little perspective, a real plague, the plague of Justinian, 541 to 542 AD, 200 million people, the bubonic plague, 70, you know, sometimes statistics for me as a historian, a little bit rougher on the edges, 75 to 200 million. Well, what is it? 75 million, that's a lot of people. 200 million, that's almost under 3 times that, to close to 2.5 times that. So come on. Anyway, let's say 100 million people died. It was bad. It was very bad. Bubonic plague, 1346, 1353. Now you can see this lasted some time, but remnants of this disease, because they didn't have the medical facilities that they have now. And this was a picture. Everything's chaotic looking, and they're just making all these coffins because everybody's dying. But remnants of this carried over to India, and that's when things kept, and India still has probably still have leprosy there and so many things. So it's a very unusual place. But I'm just trying to give you an idea of the bubonic plague. Now let's bring it up more to date. The flu pandemic of 1918, which is all this COVID-19, is really just a lab created, listen carefully, a lab created, that means artificially created by human beings, satanic human beings, evil human beings, lab created in China, in Wuhan. More about that pretty soon. Now pay strict attention, because my seminar is almost over here. I'm just bringing you up through the ranks here. Last maybe about another 10, 15 minutes. So I want you to, pay careful attention to what I'm going to show you in the next 15 minutes. So here's the flu pandemic of 1918, before they had so-called vaccines and all that. Well, keep in mind that, and there was estimated 20 to 30 million people died from influenza, the flu pandemic. Well, what's really interesting is during this period, one of the ways that this was stopped with a drug called hydroxychloroquine. Now, hydroxychloroquine was used and been FDA approved for over 70 years. And gee, what a coincidence. If you look at the timeline, 70, let's say that goes 1988, saying this lasted some time, you can see that hydroxychloroquine was developed way back just after this period, after this pandemic. You can see all the bodies piled up in the sick beds and everything. Very bad flu pandemic. That's a real pandemic. Why? Because here's pictures of people, dead bodies and things. If you want to just make a simple observation, during the whole course of this fake COVID-19 pandemic, you don't see bodies anywhere. You don't see people in beds. You don't see people like on that. Every now and then they'll put literally some actor on TV or something like that, and they suppress any doctors or anything who want to say the truth. The truth is that nationwide here in America, hydroxychloroquine is the reason the pandemic, the fake pandemic, has backed off as much as it has, even by the opposition of certain people, which I'll go over in a second. So there's a real pandemic, 20 million people dying. Ouch, that's bad. Well, then we come to, you all know about it, the HIV AIDS thing. Why weren't people quarantined and locked up? Why weren't there masks everywhere? We got the horrifying HIV, the AIDS pandemic at its peak, 2005 to 2012, 36 million people died, mostly in the gay community to start. For some reason, the same people, this is a lab created disease, the AIDS pandemic, for some reason was launched against the AIDS people. Now all you hear them yakking about is you can't be can't be racist against gays or lesbians, the LGBT, they have this whole community, but the same people who launched the COVID-19 thing and claim to be compassionate and all that as they beat up and, uh, you know, beat up cops and walk around chanting, defund the police. Good luck if you have to make a 911 call and you get a message as somebody enters your house with a knife and he's going to murder you and your kids and take all your stuff. And they're promoting this. And everybody's listening to it. Nobody's getting mad about it. Well, some of us are, but I'm just saying, you got to realize how brainwashed people are. 36 million people died from the so-called AIDS pandemic, which it was. A lot of people did die, and we know that because I've known people who were going along, gay people, and all of a sudden, oh, where's so-and-so? I had some gay neighbors when I first moved to Laguna Beach. I call it near Guna Beach. It's an affectionate name, near Guna Beach, because Srila Prabhupada, not just for me having a viewpoint or emotion, Srila Prabhupada came to Laguna Beach and he said, this is the first Krishna conscious city in the world. So if you have any faith in Prabhupada and you have any faith in Prabhupada as the Shakti Avesh manifestation or avatar, as they say, of Lord Chaitanya Nityananda, if that avatar says Laguna Beach will be the first Krishna conscious city in the world, that means technically underlying it, it's sub-programmed, subatomic level of Laguna Beach is nirguna. It is transcendental. It's beyond the modes of nature, although it'll seem like that. Just like your psychophysical body, your cerebral body, mental platform and all that is actually, it's all light, but we feel pain and we have to feed it, and the food has to go through the stomach, and the stomach nourishes the rest of the body. We've heard this before, right? But people still keep trying to jam their hand into the skin to feed it. It doesn't work. You have to take food, which is Krishna consciousness, the japa. You have to take the japa every day. You go ahead, let's see how long you can fast, 3 or 4 days without food. You say, oh, I gotta have food. You grab some food and you start eating it and chewing it. Well, similarly, the light body that we are cannot survive without Krishna consciousness. And the avatar of this age, Mahaprabhu Chaitanya, told us specifically there's magic in the counting. So you have to chant with the fingers, but generally people can't chant on their fingers like he did. You have to chant on beads, like Srila Prabhupada, the modern Avesh avatar, told us. Chant on beads, 16 rounds at least 16, but higher if you can. And if you need more instructions on doing that, I can help you with that because I've been doing it for over 40 years and I'll be glad to help train you how to do that. It is a training process because like anything, we have to train means to retrain the wrong habits and train the right habits. It's just normal. That's neuro-linguistic programming. Anthony Robbins is one of the primary practitioners of that. In fact, I went to one of Anthony Robbins seminars way back in the 80s. He came to California at the Irvine College, and I went over there, and it was the fire walk thing. And I said, I'm going to hang out with this, and they're going to do the fire walk on Sunday. So it's Friday night. I'm just going to watch and listen, and then I'll think about it. In my mind, I was thinking, and then I'll get out of here before that happens. Well, after he was done talking, and he says, I was really inspired. And he says, we're going to get this fire walk thing out of the way. And he said, let's go on outside. So, there's about 1,500 people there. So a big seminar. We went outside and there was about 9 or 10 big, long, 20, 30-foot fire pits of glowing orangish red coals, 2,000-degree coals. And I was so excited. I was the first one in line. And people were looking at me like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I said, oh, man, I'm so inspired. So I'm just giving you an example of neurolinguistic programming and how Tony Robbins used that firewalk as an example. More so than anyone, I really admire somebody who's an innovator like that and got people to break through their misconceptions about their physical, cerebral, and subatomic neurological aspect of who they really are and move into new programming and training. But it required training, and that's what we did on that night. So with that in mind, let me go to the next slide here. Now it's time to have some fun. Now, we've been told, right, China virus came from China, which is true. It was developed in a lab, in 2 labs in Wuhan. One of those labs is owned and financed by George Soros, who's originally was a Nazi. Way back during the Nazi days, he would go around and help the Nazis with different things. Now he's apparently still around. I've heard he was dead, and they're just using his image to frighten people. But regardless of whichever that is true, he's the one that all these modern day communists in America, the ones, the rioters and the Democrat Party, you can't even call them Democrats anymore. They're communists, and it's very sad to see it, and it's disgusting, but that's what's going on. And they take their marching orders from George Soros, who arranges funding through China, through drug cartels and others to pay these big Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, uh, pencil neck, they call him, the impeaching guy and all these people, Brad Sherman, who started the whole impeaching, these people are all paid according to reports and according to the drug cartel leaders, one who's in custody now in America, paid him millions of dollars. And that's why they were so against having open borders, and they're fighting President Trump all the ways he's trying to build the wall. Now, over 300 miles of the wall is built, and the whole illegal immigration all went straight down. The reports from the Border Patrol and all that, which I study all this stuff. I'm a researcher by trade. I had 3 to 4 hours a day of research, all reporting 90% drop in problems. And the few that do trickle through, they can catch them easily, ship them right back. Pretty exciting. So let's get back. So this virus, right, started in Wuhan in one lab funded by Soros and another lab probably also funded by him, but was more of the Chinese communists. A communist is a communist. They all have the same creed, the Saul Alinsky Marxist creed, which in this case is, and this can all lead up to the next couple points I'm going to make, so pay close attention, all leads up to destroy America. That's their philosophy. They can't do anything to help America. They don't love America, these communists and these so-called Democrats. All they want to do is destroy America. That means destroying your freedom to watch me speak like this on these internet platforms, to put out real news. All the news media is owned by these communists now. Everything has to be taken back. But look at this. This came out yesterday. China says the world has sour grapes about massive Wuhan water park retreat. Well, gee, the place where the coronavirus, the COVID-19 originated, you hardly see any reports from China about anybody having COVID-19. Why is that? Oh yeah, they put out little reports of a few hundred in this district, a few hundred here. But why has America got all the problems? And I'm going to go, we're heating things up now, so stay ready. So look at this. Welcome to Wuhan today. Here's a DJ, and it's like, yeah, 150,000, 115,000, I think, attended the water park, and they're just having the time of their lives, partying like there's no tomorrow. Look at the cute, very sweet people, cute people. Yeah, he's ready to rock. Look at them all. No masks, no social distancing. How come you and I are being forced to wear a mask? We can't go into the Trader Joe's or the grocery without a mask, and oh, we got to stand 6 feet apart and all this crap. But in Wuhan, the origin of the so-called Chinese virus, COVID-19, they're just partying up a storm. Now look at this. There's a lot of people there. Not a single mask in sight, is there? Not a single mask. Let's go down further. Here they're floating around in boats. 117,000 people came to the water park. Look at that. No masks, no social distancing, naked, swimsuits in water, which, conduits for diseases and germs, potentially. Not a problem if you're healthy, but nonetheless, thousands and thousands of people. in this water park. Let's take a bigger picture view. Look at that. Fires and fun things and firecrackers and water streams. And look, as far as the eye can see, thousands of people, not a mask in sight. This is from yesterday's news. Yesterday's news. Think about it. Let it soak in. But when you go out today and you want to go to the store, you're probably already brainwashed and conditioned into it. Now, I'm not saying brainwashed is bad. I'm saying that it's the TV's fault and the media's fault, and the social media networks, these criminal social media networks, Facebook and all these things, just criminals, Satanists, actually practicing Satanists. If you look at the history of these people, and I know many of you don't say, oh, you're talking about Zuckerberg with an F. Well, let me tell you something. How much research have you done on Zuckerberg with an F? I always say Zuckerberg, put an F in place of the Z. These people are evil. Sure, they build a Facebook and all that, but that's a massive, it was always planned as a massive communist spying device, and it's been very successful. Look at these people in Wuhan. This is where the disease came from, and you can't go to the store without a mask, and somebody will come up and get in your face. You got to wear a mask to come in our store. 6 feet apart, blah, 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 blah. Cops arresting people. Recently in a city not far from me, cops arrested some people. They didn't have masks on. The jerk in the store, and it was supposedly like one of these cool Whole Foods type, it wasn't a Whole Foods company, but it was one of those type of places, locked the doors like a real creep. Locked the doors to lock him in and called the police. They're going, let us out. This is completely unconstitutional. We don't want to wear a mask. Okay, we'll leave. But he locks the doors to make sure the police will come and give him a ticket and write him up. And they actually cart him away to process in downtown. But the Chinese in the city where it all originated, funded by George Soros and the communists from America, the communists from around the world, the communists in China, and yeah, that's right. You guessed it. Let's go on to the next slide here. Here's Fauci. Now, this clown, this guy's been around for 38 years, playing his game, running his scams. Now, listen to this. If you want to really be amazed, here's a report about this fellow doctor, so-called Dr. Fauci. He's the face of the current strategy in dealing with the coronavirus in Washington as the director of the U.S. National Institute. His role is highly controversial and conflicted history since he first joined NIAID in 1984. He goes back to 1984 during the beginnings of the AIDS pandemic, the AIDS panic. His role then sheds valuable light on his remarkable and highly controversial actions today. In a medical journal, this was recently, he compared COVID-19 as very similar to a seasonal flu in morbidity, in other words, death rate. Now, every month, if you spread it out over 1 year, as an average, in the United States, 5,000 people a month die from the flu. Well, that's been going on for many, many decades. Where's the panic? Where's the face mask wearing? Where's the social distancing? All that junk. Very strange. He compared it to that, but then later he started all this propaganda about lying to people and saying there's going to be over 200 million deaths in America. You may not remember that. I remember it like it was yesterday because this is what I do. I'm a researcher every day, 3-4 hours on top of all these things for my business, and I make good money from it, and that's why I do it. It's a grind. Sometimes I go, God, I hate this stuff because the news is so fake. You just get disgusted with it. But anyway, I just go on because it's part of the grind, and then I get my paychecks, and I'm happy as a clam, you know. Then I do what? Hari Bhajan. Then I guess go get busy with Hari Bhajan, and, you know, by chanting the holy name, you're able to do this kind of stuff without any problem. Without the holy name, you won't have the power to overcome the force of the Mayan illusion from a lot of this stuff. So it's very important. So moving lower here, you see this fellow used to work under Fauci, Dr. Robert Gallo. Looks like a real nice guy. Fauci has been a top post at NIAID in Washington for the astonishing 36 years, never been replaced, same old guy. He's connected. Today he's 79 years old, And he controls and holds all the funds to determine which drug companies or university researchers will get precious government funds, not from the NIAID's annual $5 billion budget. So he's got his finger on top of controlling all this. In other words, if you want a new drug, you better meet him and be, procure his favor. So let's go back to 1984 when Fauci was named head of the NIAID during the Reagan era. This AIDS researcher, Robert Gallo, had, quote, discovered the AIDS virus. He said it was the HIV human immunodeficiency virus. The shocking announcement went around the world was in complete disregard of scientific procedures or prior peer-reviewed published scientific evidence, including the required electron microscope analysis. There's the electron microscope I was talking about earlier. In other words, going way into the subatomic principles of the virus constituents of that to determine what's going on. It was never even done. It was a case of science by press conference. In other words, he just declares this thing, we got AIDS and we got this problem. Well, here's the most disgusting part. NIAID had been doing research on the role of drugs, poppers, and nitrates, which are very popular amongst the gay community. When they're approaching orgasm, they take these poppers and they try to expand it. This is the mundane nature of, actually, Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita as a demonic mentality, but trying to make their body more ecstatic with the use of drugs, especially at the time of orgasm. These are the things, proven immune suppressants, poppers, drugs, and nitrates. So in the deaths of the earliest AIDS patients, that was quickly dropped. In other words, of putting that out and telling people, stop taking these things, we'll stop the disease, but that was suppressed. And I remember, if you remember the earlier slide, I showed you 20 million people so far supposedly have died from AIDS. You hardly hear about it anymore, just the token thing, oh, they're having an AIDS fundraising. They're endlessly raising money, lining the pockets of all these doctors and researchers, but nothing gets done. It's a cash cow. It's fake. That was quickly dropped in favor of researching a, quote, cure for AIDS. Now, what is it you hear all the time on the news? Oh, if we just had the cure for COVID-19 be okay. Well, guess what? As I showed you from that flu pandemic way back in 1918, it was shortly after that when hydroxychloroquine was developed, and it wiped it out, and has been proven over the years used for other similar disease to do with respiratory ailments, of which COVID-19 is. And look at the propaganda. As soon as that came out, now I have a video, and I won't show it to you, but I had a video that I did about the coronavirus cure is here now. This was in mid-March of this year. And I had another one I did showing all the empty hospitals. The news was promoting that there's this big war out there on COVID-19. The hospitals are at war. And I had films from some other people who had gone, researchers who had gone around and filmed the hospitals inside the parking lots and everything. Where is the pandemic? There's doctors who are sitting around twiddling their thumbs, nurses and everything sitting around chatting on their cell phones, dormant ambulances. And these were in New Jersey, New York, Baltimore, major hospitals that were really being pumped up on the news as being major centers for problems. And they were empty. Well, YouTube removed that video I put up, but the one that they didn't find the other one I put up, which is openly in stating that coronavirus is immediately stopped in its tracks by the use of hydroxychloroquine, combined with zinc and another element called azithromycin. Well, guess what? Ever since that, I stated that in the video from research I did, it had been known since 2005 by Fauci and all these other people. President Trump mentioned that hydroxychloroquine is very important. And of course, they immediately started ripping on him, which they always do. Anything President Trump does that's good for the people, they start making up all kinds of stuff. It's just, it's communist run news media. The point is that after that happened, slowly but surely up to, and I don't have the letter handy for a slide here, but there was a big thing about a month ago. It was a giant doctor organization that represented thousands and thousands of doctors, and they were really loud and vocal in Washington, D.C. The name slips my mind right now. And they were talking about it. It was all banned, immediately banned on Facebook. All the videos removed, all the references to it on all the social media networks, which are all communist owned. And they immediately banned it. And they were saying hydroxychloroquine will stop this in its tracks. They've known about it since 2005. This is disgusting. Fauci lied. Thousands of people have died. That's really it. And I think that'd make a good bumper sticker if somebody wants to make one watching this video. Fauci lied. Thousands of people died. And we'll get him. That's just a matter of time. I'm sure there's plenty of things in the works now. But the point is, all they had to do was tell the gay people, knock off the drugs, poppers, and nitrates, which, that's another issue, getting people to get over things they're addicted to and the pleasures they're addicted to. Instead, they quickly dropped the idea of spreading that around, and let's start looking for a cure. Well, lo and behold, we all know what's happened with AIDS. Millions and millions of people have died, not just gay people, but people of all walks of life, children, everything, adults, children, healthy people, sick people, unbelievable. So while a frightened world was clamoring for tests, Gallo and Fauci promoted their deeply flawed tests of antibodies. In 2006, Gallo claimed HIV tests were highly accurate from the time they were developed in 1984 and have become much more accurate. Highly accurate, ? In response to that, a PCR test for the presence of the virus itself can accurately determine a child's HIV status. That's what they were saying. Well, the truth was the tests were, the viral load and the things that they used to determine if you had HIV were completely flawed and were invalid. None of the tests detect the HIV virus itself, nor do they detect HIV particles. We're hearing this now. I am, as a researcher. People who don't research won't hear this. It's real simple. They're not going to put it on the fake news, which are all communist-owned news media, including the social media networks, and you're not going to see it there. But if you're a researcher like I am, many, many reports about how the death figures are faked and how tests that they're handing out, everybody's clamoring, oh, testing, blaming President Trump. Oh, you're not doing enough testing. He's done more than anybody in the whole world. But the problem is it's coming up that a lot of the tests make people, or they'll give a false positive, just like the AIDS test didn't work at all. These don't work either. Or in fact, in fact, I've seen reports, they tested a giraffe positive for COVID-19. They tested a cat positive for COVID-19. Many pets and animals positive for COVID-19. Oh, my poor fur baby's going to die of COVID-19. No, the tests are fake. So you got a real problem. You got a real thing. And if you really search the root of all this, it's actually demonic what's going on. And it's disgusting. But that's just to give you a little picture there. And now wrapping up the seminar, probably the most respected group, the Johns Hopkins University Coronavirus Resource Center, showing very details about everything. Now I want to show you this, and I hope you can see it okay. Take a quick look, first of all, up here. Now, keep in mind that from the research that I've been doing, this is from doctors in the hospitals, nationwide, thousands and thousands of doctors and surgeons and everything are reporting that the deaths that are being reported in America are at least very minimal, 50% fabricated. So it's cut this figure in half. They're saying up to 80%. And the few remaining 20, 30% were all from people who were in our hospitals who were already sick from some other problem. That's the majority of so-called deaths of the so-called fake COVID-19. So look at this. So here's 175,000. Now, even if you consider that America has approximately 330 million people here, remember the earlier slide I showed you, and that's why I showed it to you, of what real pandemics look like? 100 million, 200 million, 50 million people dying, bodies piled up, hospitals filled. The pictures I showed you, all those people in that hospital back in 1918 of the flu pandemic, 175,000 supposed deaths, which we know for a fact that at least half those are fabricated. There's been reports, I saw some recently, a guy died, crashed in a motorcycle, went to the hospital, COVID-19, died of COVID-19. A hospital, a motorcycle accident immediately gets reported as COVID-19. It's automatic. It's called the medical mafia. And they're part of this whole communist scam. But take a look at this. I want you to see this. Let's pretend, first of all, let's for fun, pretend that these figures are absolutely real. Okay? And it makes Hopkins suspicious that they're coming in involved in all this, but that's a big whatever, you know? 175,000 divided into 330 million approximate population of the United States is less than 1/3%. Simply by mathematical calculation, that is not a pandemic. 2-3%, you're getting close to a pandemic. 1% isn't even a pandemic. 2-3%, you got a problem. That and I've already explained to you, these are fake figures. You do the research yourself, you'll find out. But I don't expect you to do that. You have your life to live, and that's what they rely on, that people won't do research. Not a pandemic figure, and just going on these figures. 1/3%, not a pandemic. Sorry, fake. And then we go right under that to Mexico, or we go under that to India's next. And then look how quickly the so-called deaths start dropping off. All of a sudden, we're talking 6,000, a few thousand people, Netherlands, Egypt. But I want to show you this. And these are their figures, and they're the most respected in the business. Japan, beautiful Japan, 1,200 deaths, supposedly. And again, half those probably questionable. But here's what's a real kicker here. Here's all these poor countries, Kenya, some of these other ones, with virtually not as good as American medical facilities and treatments, right? 166 deaths. Malawi, you hear about Malawi all the time and the problems there with some of the political stuff there. 166 deaths. Zimbabwe, you've heard of Zimbabwe. 152 deaths in Zimbabwe. That's like normal. I mean, that many people are going to die from mosquito infections in Zimbabwe, I'm sure more even. Look at Somalia. Everybody's heard of Somalia and all the political problems and everything there. 93 deaths in Somalia. How is this a pandemic? Well, the answer is explained. I won't go on, but I did want to show you one here. Let's go to the bottom. What about Cuba? Everybody's always complaining about Cuba, and it's a communist place, and it's right next to America, and all the things of that. Look at Cuba, 89 deaths in Cuba. And they got so many problems over there, and we've seen on the news, and when they had that hurricane and President Trump sent all that water over, and they found it all stored. The communist governor of Cuba hid all the water and supplies that President Trump sent over to him. It's a side subject, but just to give you an idea how evil these communist people are. 89 deaths is all that's being reported. And let's go down a little further. Are the lights coming on a little bit here? Syria, are the lights coming on? Look at that, Eswatini place, maybe you never heard of. The Congo. Everybody knows the Congo's got all these problems with, the health and the illnesses there and the things you hear about in Botswana and the Congo. 77 deaths from so-called coronavirus, and probably half of that fake. And last but not least, we come down to Tunisia, Estonia, Central African Republic, 61 deaths. Well, enough of this. I could go all the way down. Let's go all the way to the bottom. Just if you're like me or researcher, you're curious, right? We're almost done with our seminar here. Look at that. The Bahamas, 27 deaths. Singapore, a lovely, or 27 deaths in Singapore, a lovely city. gateway to India many times, depending on the flight you take. If you take Singapore Airlines, they're going to stop in that lovely country. 27 deaths. What did they do different? Are they wearing masks? No. Are they social distancing? No. Are any of these other, or Botswana, people in Botswana wearing masks and social distancing? Maldives, a beautiful Maldives, 26 deaths. And they blame the kids over there. You see pictures of them partying in the ocean and they have a nice party kind of place. What do they got to worry about? There's no deaths from it, and probably half of those are fake too. Vietnam, everybody knows it's kind of an edgy place, a lovely place. I have many Vietnamese friends here in California. Lovely place, lovely people. 26 deaths. You'd say their medical facilities aren't as good as America. Everybody, oh, but they're not as good as America. America's got a medical mafia that makes sure people die. How about New Zealand? Now, supposedly we're hearing things that they're kicking it up and they're putting all these reports I've been seeing there, because one of our respected sannyasis who works with our group here, our real yoga mission group, Keshav Maharaj Ki Jai, he's from New Zealand. And I was asking, he didn't say much, but the reports I'm getting as a researcher every day, coming in over 150 resources I look at every day, are saying, oh, New Zealand's going to have another big wave. Well, they're so far only showing 22 deaths. Not much of a problem for those folks. Mozambique, you've heard of that? 20 deaths in Mozambique. I mean, it's like, we're so sorry those people died. How about Jamaica, man? Jamaica, man. Oh my God, so many problems there. You heard the stories of the starvation and the drug problems and the this and the that. 16 deaths from the so-called COVID-19. Why don't they put that on the fake news? You see the ads running for the these groups. Hey, come to Jamaica, have the time of your life, you know, for these hotel things and all that. Well, they don't have to worry, but they should put that in their ads. There's only COVID-19 in America, it appears. Let's move on. Let me show you this now. In wrapping this up, I'm just showing you. Look at 7 deaths in Taiwan. 7 deaths in Taiwan. That's almost negligible. Well, that is negligible. It's a big population. I've been to Taiwan. 7 deaths in Taiwan. Burma, everybody hears about Burma and the problems there with the, what's that group called, that militant group and all that. 6 deaths from the COVID-19. Belize, beautiful. Monaco, of course, that's one of the richest countries in the world. 4 deaths. Nobody's going to die. They're not going to wear masks in Monaco. Are you kidding me? Antigua, Barbados. I used to bank in Antigua. Been there many times. Let me tell you something. They're showing 3 deaths in Antigua. I was once at the fanciest hotel. I was having meetings with some bankers. I was with in Antigua. It was all legal because you're offshore and all that. I went to this fancy hotel, sitting there dining, and being a longtime vegetarian, I was trying to find some things, but I got a nice salad and some French fries or something. And I'm eating, and all of a sudden, this giant tarantula, about 4 inches in length. If you make a circle with your fingers, a picture like 4-inch big giant thing, is walking across the middle of the floor. And I'm going, waitress, waitress. I got a little bit excited. You know, these things are deadly. I go, she's, yes, sir, yes, sir. And I go, tarantula, right? What's that? She goes, oh. And real casually, she pulls off her shoe and runs over and starts beating the crap out of the spider. And it starts squirming and running around. She's beating it and beating it. I'm going, I'm only telling you this. Why? Because Antigua is kind of a get down place. It's not very, it's not high up on the list of medical facilities or, shall we say, government regulations for restaurants with tarantulas walking around in them. Eric Clapton's got his drug rehab place there. You know, it's a lovely country, beautiful place. I was happy with my trip there, went swimming and all that. But I'm just saying, not a very medically, and this is broken up between the 2 islands, Antigua and Barbuda. 3 deaths. This is all updated as of today. It's all updated every day. I wanted to show you that and tell you that little story about Antigua. Pretty amazing. Well, now look, here you go. Here you go. So here's the heat map showing everything, right? Now, you can't quite see the line up here, but see how these red dots come up here, right up in here? This is all Canada up here. Now look at this. You talk about communist controlled, completely organized, disgustingly organized. It's the target for the whole world. Everybody wants to take over America, especially the communists. They've been at it for a while. Look at this, almost like a crystal clear line drawn across here between the border of Canada, America, and all the red dots which symbolize cases. Here's Florida. Here we are right here in California, in Laguna Beach. Thick red blanketing the whole state. Now, I've often said, and this is just a theory, I'll admit it, but I think what they did, because remember, they were pushing the Trump impeachment after the phony Trump colluded with Russia completely fell apart. They immediately rolled right into, we got to impeach Trump. He didn't do anything. And they pushed that for a while. I watch, because I watch this stuff every day. It's my job while I'm observing the financial markets and so many things around the world. The minute they realized the impeachment thing was over and it failed. Now, the COVID-19 had been going on in China for about 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe a little more, and they were talking about it, but it was like way over there, some disease, whatever. As soon as the impeachment thing was done, the very day, the next day, the news, just like clockwork, shifted over to coronavirus, coronavirus, coronavirus. And up to this day, and if you end watching this seminar and you go turn on your TV, if you have one, or your internet, you'll immediately see headlines wherever you look, COVID-19, COVID-19, and it hasn't let up since. I believe this is my theory, I believe that they had 4 of these labs funded by George Soros here in America, maybe one down in Florida, down this way, up in New York, especially up in there, up here in the East Coast, maybe one in the center. Not as many cases in these other states because the governors in them won't allow all this communism and all this rioting and all that stuff. I think they had 4 or 5 centers and they just said, okay, it's all a go now. Media's turned on and they released the disease in America because within a week, I remember it like it was yesterday, the whole country, there's a pandemic and a plague and a pandemic in America with this COVID-19. They started calling COVID-19. Now everybody's so easily brainwashed. They quickly start calling, oh, COVID. Well, because of COVID, they give it a abbreviated name instead of being disgusted and protesting that this fake thing has been promoted on us. Look at America. Look at the rest of the world. Dots here and there. Yeah, Europe. They got Europe too because that's an important control factor. Look at that. And then right on the board of Canada is Canada's, look, Canada's not, it's all one big planet, right? Well, it's one big North America, at least, you'll agree. A border doesn't change a disease from spreading all over. It's called America was the target and is the target for the takeover by the communists. They don't really seem to care much about Canada. Now, the governor there is a communist anyway, or the president, whatever they call it. But the point is, no disease. Look at Canada. And you got French Canada. You got Quebec, where a good friend of mine lives, Patrick Bernard Prahalad Das, who was a beautiful singer, still is. He still does concerts in his state there of Quebec. Where's the pandemic? It's all blank. It's black colored here. But boy, you cross the border to America, all red. And all hyped to this day. Absolutely fake, disgusting, and we need a nationwide million-man march protest. We got to get a Fauci under arrest. All these things have to happen. Vitally important to stop this nonsense. It is complete and utter nonsense. They've ruined businesses. They've ruined the airports, as Chintamani will, she'll admit to. They've ruined everything with this fake thing. And as far as spiritual practices, temples are closed, churches are closed, gatherings, and they have these drive-by viewings in Los Angeles of Lord Jagannath, Rath Yatra. Give me a break. Radha Charandas Dave wouldn't have taken that stuff. I'm just saying. So we're coming back full circle back to how I started the seminar. Radha Charandas Dave went without any fear, without any mental condition, without any thinking about it, or, well, what if, and where are we going to eat? Where are we going to sleep? What about the water? It's all completely 100%, 108% surrender to Lord Hari. And we're going to go and he defeated the pandemic with Kirtan. So I just want you to reflect on that and reflect on what's going on now. And you just have to consider it. That's all. Just consider, why are we allowing this to happen? Just normal people, what to speak of the devotees. Where is the passion? Where is the gut? This is ridiculous. So anyway, with that in mind, I just want to make sure you understood all this clearly. Keep in mind too that the New Age movement, all of this was programmed by an LSD experiment back in the early days in Woodstock. Woodstock had Hare Krishna mantras stenciled on the front of the stage, but they never show that because there's naturally a bigotry. The CIA and these groups knew about Hare Krishna way back when. They tracked and researched Prabhupada and his books. I had documents that I had seen way back when I was showing them to Mukunda Maharaj. Pretty amazing stuff. I verified with him, are these slokas here? He said, yeah, that's Prabhupada's Gita. They were watching him. So, all this, the yoga communities, the bhakti community, Bhakti Fest community, the New Age movement, all this was started during the Woodstock period. And that was started by an LSD operation. They had realized that LSD was very valuable for helping patients get better, but they didn't want to do that. They also knew that it would open them up and make them more easily brainwashed. So they made a systematic effort to do that through two particular characters, which you may recognize, and that was Timothy Leary and his partner and good pal, Richard Alpert, Dr. Richard Alpert, who later became known as Ram Dass. So through the use of drugs and LSD, they popularized the hippie thing, the hippie movement, which expanded, and that's how Prabhupada, he engaged the hippies. He didn't really respect them, but he respected them enough because they were the people that were open from the use of the drugs, the LSD and everything, were coming out and wanting to serve his Guru Maharaj's mission and improve their lives by becoming followers of Srila Prabhupada and Lord Hari. So in that sense, it was good, but he never really appreciated hippies much at all. So, it's called making the best use of a bad bargain. So keep in mind, the main point in ending the seminar here is that of that group, devotees, New Age people, I'm just a researcher. For me, whatever, the Lord is arranging, that's the way it is. But 80% at least, I would say, are communist, brainwashed by communists. If you mention President Trump or something, they'll flare up and start bashing away. Oh, he's a this, he's that. They have no proof because they don't research. They don't even, they just hear what their other people are telling them. So they've managed to spread that kind of propaganda. Most of them, I would say 80% are communists. And you have to look in the mirror if it's one of you listening to this, because this video, by the way, is going to go out. It'll get thousands of viewers over the next year. If that's one of you, take a good look in the mirror and ask yourself, would you ever been able to chant Hare Krishna if the country had been communist? Very doubtful. That'd have been snuffed out right away. If you want some proof of that, look at Russia. Those early Russian devotees were put in cold prisons and sent off, and many of them disappeared for a long time, and some of them never showed up again. They went through tremendous struggle in the early days of ISKCON. Prabhupada was so merciful on them. He went to Russia, but they were hungry for it. And then later, through many changes that went on in Russia, devotees got some freedom to go out and gather. They could gather. I don't think the chanting was as much, but then later they had concerts and everything opened up, and I forget the name of that, perestroika or something like that. It meant, it's the new Russia. The wall came down. That was all back remember that in the 80s and stuff. So, but if you look in the mirror and realize you're a communist, you would never be a devotee if that had happened to America, because they would have been a lot stricter here. They wouldn't have let it happen. My guess is that they wouldn't have. So anyway, this just comes from the research, and I don't think about it with personal viewpoints. I try to think about it in terms of what would have happened. And the way it's going now, with 80% of that crowd, which was basically programmed to be that way through the early uses of LSD, Ram Dass, Timothy Leary, the big festivals in San Francisco and everything, and then now coming through from the 70s through the 80s and the use of the modern social media networks and everything. It's something to think about. And we're supposed to be the cool ones. We're supposed to be the cool ones who get what's happening. and who understand that we want these things, not that we should be the slaves of this communist propaganda, especially, dear God, as supposed devotees of Lord Chaitanya. We have no interest in this political stuff, other than we have interest in freedom, but not in this political stuff. But we're talking here about life and death. We're talking about when they're saying defund the police. Well, many times the temples have had attacks. What if the police weren't there to be called? So keep that in mind. Tell your friends. And if you don't mind, have them watch our video. It'll help you, I think. So thank you so much for joining with us today. And if you have any questions, as soon as our beloved Chintamani Devi turns off the camera, we can ask him. Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Guru Dev, Jai Lord Hari, Mahaprabhu Ki Jai.